Hello, welcome back to Book from Tape. I am Jordan Woods Robinson, and I'm here to empower you with the tools to book directly from your audition tape. And today's episode is slightly out of the norm. This is a conversation that my wife, Julie, and I had as a part of our monthly ABC, which is the Actors Book Club. And we're discussing David Mamet's True and False. Normally, we'd be joined by a bunch of different actors calling in, and this time, for whatever reason, scheduling and whatnot, it was actually just the two of us. And so we sat down and we started this free-form conversation about the book. And by the end of the conversation, we realized we'd actually covered quite a bit of ground, discussing everything from Stanislavski and Meisner to David Mamet, to Harold Guskin, to a number of different theories and things that were written in the book versus other ways that I interpreted them or Julie interpreted them, and how we can use them in a practical sense. So without further ado, here is our conversation on David Mamet's True and False.
Recording.
Maybe
We'll get a podcast out of this.
It's actually really unfortunate if people don't show up to this one, because this one just is full of debate because it's such a strong opinion. Wait, so the book was True or False by David Mamet. There we go. And there was plenty in it that the whole time I was like, this guy, like all the way through. I mean, I was like, he's a jerk and frankly likes uber masculine in a way that does not fly today the way it did in 1997. But it's always worth coming up against something that challenges you because it asks you to think. And there are plenty of good little nuggets in here. I think some of the packaging of those nuggets is a little borderline offensive to the craft. But
here's where I think it was a huge success. And I mentioned this to you last night, is that yes, he's extremely pompous the whole time throughout it. But I think it is an excellent example of a person who has a belief set for themselves and follows it 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, sometimes contradicts themselves because they firmly believe this, and they firmly believe this, and sometimes little portions of that overlap, and you're like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
But he has formed his opinions. He has formed his path, right? In a focusing way that allows him to fully approach everything that he does with fervor and passion and not having to second guess it, saying, am I doing this right? Is this how they want it? He's like, this is how it needs to be, period. And that's the gumption and courage with which actors need to approach their auditions, approach their scenes.
That's true. In a way, it's compelling to read because of that courage.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a series of short essays on different things that perturb him about the industry.
I know.
Rather than like an acting book.
It's certainly not like a feel good, encouraging you that you can do anything you want kind of book.
And I have to say, I agree with a lot of it. Even if it's putting it in my own words while he says it, even if I'm like, oh yeah, I agree with this phrase that you said,
mm-hmm.
and that allows me to understand your point about it. I think it's misguided. I think there are more ways to examine this than what you just said, but I understand and I do agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I would say as much as he kind of annoyed me and angered me throughout the book, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
In its core, that idea of getting out of your head, just going, a lot of his little nuggets I really did agree with. It was just the way he got about them that kind of got under my skin.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've talked about what we don't like.
We're totally just creating our own little show right now.
We are. You missed a great conversation, people. But hey, if we're going to have this conversation at home together, we might as well let people in.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's talk about what we did like. The actor does not need to become the character. When he or she says them simply in an attempt to achieve an object, more or less like that suggested by the author, the audience sees an illusion of a character upon stage, which to him, illusion is the best you can hope for. That sounds kind of negative in this quote, but he was saying I need to become the character is ridiculous because in reality, you will never be that person. You are only ever giving the audience what they perceive as the character, which is in essence an illusion because you're a person who is different from the character. And we like that, right? And
he also, it's important to...
And being simple, right? The most simple objective, moment by moment, play that and see where it leads you.
And he does, I mean, as pompous as he is in this book, he does self-deprecate himself in that moment. And he says, these are only words on a page. This is black ink on white paper, right? Mm-hmm. This doesn't have, there's nothing about the script that should be in the performance, really. Like, the performance is the actor living on stage and using...
And that kind of performance is what is actually interesting.
Right.
Somebody being real. Right. And real is yourself. Another tidbit that we liked, the very act of striving to create an emotional state in oneself takes one out of the play. I totally believe this, right? That's fake emotions, trying to get sad, trying to start crying or whatever, right? Is not as helpful or truthful as just being available as an actor.
And it's a task.
And then playing, doing your tasks,
it's a
right?
No, I'm saying the crying.
Oh.
I have actors come into the studio all the time who look at me with like deer in the headlights saying, I have to cry today. I'm like, no, you don't. No one plans to cry. No one plans to cry.
Yeah.
You are,
if
people are surprised by tears.
Yeah,
people try to hold back tears.
If you're playing your objective, you're trying to achieve your task in the scene, right? And it's so frustrating that the other character just does not get there. Like, maybe that makes you cry because you're trying so hard and it's not working. Absolutely. Right? But to falsely create emotion is,
it takes
stupid,
you out. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Something else that we really liked, talking about the outward directedness of an actor brings real life to the state of magnificent responsiveness and makes his progress or her progress thrilling to watch. Basically saying, again, like, your action towards the other character, outward directness instead of this inward obsession, right? Because nobody wants to watch you like obsessed, like I just said, over your own beautiful thing that you're creating, as opposed to what's more interesting is seeing your focus be on the other.
Mm-hmm. I think this takes me back to
responsiveness.
Right. Yeah. It's not, he has a whole thing in here about being introverted while going through stuff and how that doesn't help anyone. But this specific passage of the outward directness, focusing on your scene partner, focusing on, the action, getting what you need out of them, takes me back to Liz Swados' thing of perform to save a life. You're not just doing this to share the story, you're doing this to
reach someone out there.
Yeah.
You're, like he says, you're just delivering it to the audience. Mm-hmm. You don't need to explain it to them. You're bringing it to them. Oh, and the huff.
Yes, that's what the breath.
Huff.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy.
So he says that this is the common trend. He specifically mentions film and TV actors, right? Mm-hmm. That in an emotional scene or in any scene, the new trend in order, and I see this with actors all the time.
I see it with stage actors too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That mid-scene you'll go, this is what I think about that, right? You'll take that huff in between lines.
It's always right before.
And that was an exaggerated version. It doesn't even have to be that big.
Oh my gosh, I've seen it bigger.
Yeah.
But it's right before. It's usually right before something emotional. And what he's saying is that huff. He says that's where the scene went, and I'm like,
it's gone.
100%. You just took all that natural emotion and response, and instead of acting on it, you expelled it because it wasn't in the line of what you had planned to do, and then you go back to what you had planned to do.
Right. He talks about it has to be memorized, and you have to stand there bravely and boldly without adding anything, without inventing anything or denying anything.
Yeah.
Right? He says invent.
What I like about that is, actually, I like that in general, right? Even when we do viewpoints a lot in our classes, and when we do those, right, you almost have to stop the actors if they are inventing too much, right? Because they're not being open and available. They're coming in feeling that they're being super clever, which is only putting up a wall between them and all the other actors in the space, as opposed to coming in and being fully available and then responding to what happens.
Which is much scarier.
Yeah.
And that's why he says stand there with courage, right?
What does he say? Deny nothing, right? Deny nothing is responding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and invent nothing is...
Don't embellish.
Don't embellish, and stop thinking you're the only important thing here.
However, at the same time, invent nothing also carries that if you do truly feel that impulse to follow it, right?
Because you're not denying.
Then you're denying it, right?
Yeah.
And it's not an embellishment if a moment affects you differently tonight than it has for the past 30 times you've run it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not inventing it. That is, and if you don't throw it away on a breath, that is still truly inventing nothing and denying. That's the goal, is to get to that point where you can just follow that current of thought, right?
Yeah. The actor has his own trials to go, and they're right in front of him. Oh, he's adding nothing, denying nothing, right? He's talking about how it takes courage to just be truthful, to just be open and truthful and not know what's going to happen next. And if you can just train yourself to be brave enough on a regular basis, to be able to drop into the mindset where you're like, now is the time when I put everything else away and I'm just there. And we'll see what happens. And he said that courage is the actor's hard task. So stop trying to put all these other tasks on yourself. Oh, yeah. So he talks about another way to talk about an objective is to think about the way we tell a punchline in a joke. So he says, if you're telling a joke, you know what the punchline is. You inherently, everything you say is directed towards that punchline. It's leading in a way. And that's just something we do. And he says things that are not leading toward that punchline, we also inherently just exclude them. So what's your objective? What do I want? Everything that I'm doing, all my actions then always lead back to that, right? And so we were saying, that kind of sounds like, though, a little bit of critique for a writer, right? Then telling them, if it's unnecessary, cut it out. Because the actor, you're not going to cut it out. It's in the script. But then we realized that if something's in the script, then I think it's always in the actor's best interest to at least assume that the script is well written so that while you're performing it, right? So then deciding that if it's in the script and I think it's irrelevant to this action, then either my impulse about what my action is wrong, or I have to keep trying out this moment, this line, until it does lead to the action. Ask yourself, why is it in the scene? And find the missing piece to that puzzle that you didn't have.
And another way of saying that, I think, goes back to finding it in your own words. Because if you are running the scene in your own words and you find the simplest way to say this, and it's only a sentence or two long to get you to successfully get you to that punchline, and yet the script has you going off on a monologue a little bit, then I think that's a clue to the actor to say, this person went off on a tangent. Like they got sidetracked, they got distracted by something, they had another thought, they doubted themselves in the moment.
To say it,
they
were stalling.
And now it's whether or not the writer intended that's true to you, because you could say it so much more easily in different circumstances, right? So then why do I have to say all these other words? And that gives you a little, make it work, people.
I still think that it can be helpful to write down action words and objectives, right? I know Jordan doesn't agree with that. I think it depends on the person, but what I think is not to live by them religiously.
Right. The reason for me saying it is in line with what he's saying, where once you write it on the page, that is still just ink on paper, right? It's not helping you get anywhere other than cataloging and
sure.
Right. But then as the actor, if it locks you into the script more, so now you're in the scene and all you're doing is like a scrolling page of watching the PDF of the script go by as you're talking and you're seeing the little notes in the margins and stuff, that's not helpful to me. I feel like that locks you into the page more as opposed to...
And I can see that. And I think the only way, or the only circumstance in which it would be helpful is if you're able to, if you're exploring physically, you're doing it on its feet, and you're like, kind of like that idea. I just want to remember that was one of the options. Write it down, but not lock yourself in, but just to know that one time I was doing that and that worked. Maybe I'll go back to it. I could see how that could be helpful, but it isn't helpful if it locks you in. And I guess it's kind of hard.
It's one of those impossible tasks.
Let yourself
right?
be locked in.
Like there's the whole trick of writing your script out as a letter to someone, right? And the whole point of that is to make it a personal thing, get it off of the printed page and put it into your handwriting and everything,
Mhm.
which is cool. It is cool, and it
Except for
does it actually help it
kind
get
of
in your body more?
Yeah, it's an introverted story that you're telling.
Yeah.
It's like when somebody is talking to their mirror about all the things they would say, right? And then you just get obsessed with something that's not really happening, as opposed to going to say something to someone else and them surprising you with some sort of reaction or response or words or interruption and having a real reaction, which is going to throw you off from what you planned. And that's
good.
Good thing.
I like the key to wisdom is the phrase, I don't understand.
Allowing yourself to just be in a state of, I don't understand.
Right. Because he says that puts you in the same state as the protagonist, as the person that you are portraying.
Because they don't know what's going to happen.
They don't know. We don't know. We're in I'm assuming that I'm going to talk until you interrupt me. If you just say, I don't understand, then that puts you in a state to just begin the scene from a place of not planning and taking everything at face value and looking for clues.
Jordan was just saying he's going to do that on a scene today.
I am. And he says there's no emotional support for a lover leaving you or someone dying in your life. There's no emotional preparation for that, right? It just lands on you and you have to deal with it, right? And that's what it's the same thing with the scripts. Like, they just land on you,
but you have to be available.
Yeah.
Emotionally available.
Yeah.
Physically available.
And probably expecting something else to happen, at least this is getting into he would probably argue this, right? That, I mean, I would think as an actor, like if you just found out that, just in a scene, you just found out that your mom died, right? You get a knock on the door and a police officer is there and says that your mom has just gotten in a car accident and didn't make it, right? I would think as an actor, a way to prepare yourself for that, to have like the greatest impact, is to say, mom was coming to pick me up to take me to this concert that we've been planning for 10 years, or like something, which
is an embellishment.
It is. It's an embellishment, so
you would say you're inventing.
Yeah.
But we've all seen those Law and Order episodes where someone does that really well, that moment when the police knock on the door, and then we've all seen the ones where someone does it really poorly, like they scream and wail, and you're just like, that was, I don't know, something about that didn't feel right. It's like you didn't even hear them first or something. But then again, I've seen the ones where it's too underplayed, and then that doesn't seem right either, and they look like the killer right away because they didn't care that their parent died. I don't know.
Okay, so I've got two examples. One is, if someone gets information like that, then your mind doesn't go immediately into, oh my God, I've lost my parent forever. It goes into, okay, so what do I need to do, officer, in order to finalize this process that you've started right now, right? Okay, so I'll get to that in a little bit. I'm going to swallow that for a second. Do I need to sign something? Do I need to go to the morgue? Do I need to identify the body? Like, what do I need to do now, right? There's a new action that's in place of you. That's your job right now.
Or the action could be like, if there's like a feeling of like, well, I need to stop it or prevent it. And then you're like, wait, it's over. I could see that also being another one. But same kind of thing. Like, what's next?
You'll have time later to decompress. It's like when you get back from a vacation and then you get sick, right? But the other thing is, so for instance, when our son hit his head and had a giant gash running down his forehead, normally, in many circumstances, I'd be the person to pick him up, be the strong, comforting, holding stuff on his head, while frankly you would probably be slightly hyperventilating in the corner going, okay, what do we need to, how do I do this, how do I fix this,
but
to a certain degree. However, when it happened, I wasn't there.
Yes.
And it was your job to be the one to be the, all right, okay, who's got a car? Great. Okay. Where's the closest hospital? Can you please, can you Google, find out where we need to go next? Hey, buddy, we got you, and it's a different thing. You don't have time to get emotional.
And my friends who were there were like, it was weird. You were so calm.
Because that's the job in front of you.
This is what I need to do. This is what I need to do. This is what we need to do. Somebody get this to wipe the blood out of his eyes.
Your job at that point is not to see the bigger picture and to think about the scar and to think about how he's going to be affected. It's to get him to somebody that can stop his head from bleeding.
Yeah.
Period. Like, that's it. And to make sure that he's comfortable while he's doing that, The rational brain does not jump to the big picture when you're faced with something as big picture as that. It focuses on the small stuff in front of you, maybe out of self-preservation, maybe out of
But what's kind of funny, even in just this, like my reaction, there's a character study for a moment. They all said I was so calm, and I know I did those things. I know I said those things, but I wasn't calm inside.
Your brain was freaking out.
Yeah, I was freaking out, but I was very focused on what I needed to do and on making sure everybody else stopped freaking out because they were making him more upset and he was upset. So I was just outwardly focused, I guess, and I was worrying about all of them. Say you had to play a scene like that, what gets played is the outward focus, right? If you tried to play that inward freak out, you would get lost. And if you try to play that, if you just play the outward emotion, or the outward actions there rather, that's what everybody else is seeing anyway. Even if what I was experiencing inside was different, if I tried to play what I was experiencing inside to a viewer, it wouldn't have been what they needed to see.
Breaking it down and taking care of one small puzzle piece at a time until everything's okay again. And I mean, he has this other thing in here. He's like, as a director and as a writer, I've heard actors tear themselves apart saying that was terrible or that was wonderful in two performances that I couldn't personally tell the difference from the audience's perspective. And as the person who's directing and writing it. So like half of this roadblock is in your mind.
Yeah.
You know, and it has nothing to do with what you were actually doing. So leave it at the door and come back to it later the next time if you want to try something else.
I would actually take out of this that if he were to propose any kind of training, that the training is not so much acting theory and concepts, but more so just exercises that encourage you to get out of your mind and relax, separate from acting, and then just practice, like just practice on your feet. Right? Like he's saying, just do it. Well, if you're not in a play or you're not in a movie and you don't have those things to practice, you could go to class. I don't think he would propose any class. I'm just saying, if he were to propose class, it seems like that would be what he would say. Almost like Russ's classes, where it's like, bring in a scene, let's do it, let's work on it. And then when that scene is over, the scene is over. Like it was just an opportunity to act, and then it's done.
Exactly.
And you just have to practice more and more how to be able to just drop into being available. But to me, the kind of training that's like yoga and breath or physical games or things which maybe aren't even directly associated with a particular role or script, but it's just exercises to release the body. To me, having somewhere with people to remind me to do that, to me, that's training.
I mean, it really depends on, he says that most teachers like bastardize it, right? And I think that is true. And what you're saying, if that is school, it's just being able to get up and practice and be that vessel that allows things to flow through, then you shouldn't have like a certain stamp on your performance when you get out of there. Because then that is just more of a cult, like he's saying. I mean, he uses that word where he says modern day acting teaching is, or Stanislavski, that's what he says, Stanislavski schooling is not revolutionary, it's a cult.
Yes.
And
to which I still put the caveat on, he's talking about Strasberg and Adler,
the method,
and
quote unquote,
the American bastardization of Stanislavski. He's not talking about the actual contributions Stanislavski made.
At the same time, though, like I think that Stanislavski got so much fame and fortune because he was coming out of a time when things were so presentational. Everything before Stanislavski was, I'm going to stand on the stage and today I am playing King James III and I am meeting my my vixen in the woods, and then you step back 3 feet and now you're in the scene, right? And he came about and said, look, it's not about gestures, it's not about proclamation and showing the audience is an emotional character and wants to follow along with you, so all you have to do is find the true emotion of that. And at first he started to speculate that it was sense memory, that it was right, but no acting was natural. No, everything was presentational. As opposed to now, it's a given that everything is natural. There are moments.
The ideal is to be natural.
Right. There are moments of it being heightened. Otherwise, it's if the whole project is heightened, then it's stylized, right? It's not what the current understanding of acting is. So I can see that people who continue to belabor the quote unquote Stanislavski side of things. Like there are some good guidelines there, but that's not the end all be all, right? Like, I mean, it's
I
like,
like that word belabor, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just like people are continue exploring it and beating it to death, right?
Yeah.
And obsessing over it to the point where now they're so in their heads that they can't be
right,
in their bodies.
right,
But it's funny because if you think about the actual history of that, right? Stanislavski was reactionary to what was happening in his time. And anyone who's being sort of revolutionary in their field, they're pushing back against something, right? So
Right.
he was pushing back against that, right? But at any given time, we need to continue pushing back against whatever we've been doing
right,
in order to keep pushing the field forward to finding something new. Because if you stay in that for 100 years, right, you're going to get lost. And so eventually someone needs to push back against that, which people did. And then eventually Stanislavski decided that focusing on the emotions and the mental inner life, just the psychology, was not true, and rather getting at something through physical actions was how you release that psychology
right,
without being in your head,
right.
which is the core of this. I just think it's not to his legacy's credit that Mamet is using his
whole
framing
soapbox
his critique.
is taking on Stanislavski and anyone that considers themselves to be a student of Stanislavski.
Yeah, but I mean, what he should be saying is, that's all well and good, but you didn't push far enough.
Right. Okay.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. This conversation was a part of our Actors Book Club. If you want to be a part of that, it's a free monthly conversation, usually with more people, I swear, that focuses on a different acting book each month. And you can sign up for that at bookfromtape.com. And you'll get an email with next month's book. You read it, you show up, we talk about it, and it's a great way to keep up with your craft and to meet some new folks. Thank you so much, and this is Jordan Robinson saying I can't even pronounce my own name properly.